This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Rosalind Wills of Silver Spring, Maryland. How to Speak and Write Correctly by Joseph Devlin. Chapter 6. Letter Writing. Principles of Letter Writing. Forms, Notes. Many people seem to regard letter writing as a very simple and easily acquired branch, but on the contrary it is one of the most difficult forms of composition and requires much patience and labor to master its details. In fact, there are very few perfect letter writers in the language. It constitutes the direct form of speech and may be called conversation at a distance. Its forms are so varied by every conceivable topic, written at all times by all kinds of persons in all kinds of moods and tempers, and addressed to all kinds of persons of various degrees in society and of different pursuits in life, that no fixed rules can be laid down to regulate its length, style, or subject matter. Only general suggestions can be made in regard to scope and purpose, and the forms of inditing set forth which custom and precedent have sanctioned. The principles of letter writing should be understood by everybody who has any knowledge of written language, for almost everybody at some time or other has necessity to address some friend or acquaintance at a distance, whereas comparatively few are called upon to direct their efforts towards any other kind of composition. Formerly the illiterate countryman, when he had occasion to communicate with friends or relations, called in the peripatetic schoolmaster as his amanuensis, but this had one drawback. Secrets had to be poured into an ear other than that for which they were intended, and often the confidence was betrayed. Now that education is abroad in the land, there is seldom any occasion for any person to call upon the service of another to compose and write a personal letter. Very few nowadays are so grossly illiterate as not to be able to read and write. No matter how crude his effort may be, it is better for any one to write his own letters than trust to another. Even if he should commence, "Dear friend, I lift up my pen to let ye know that I hove been sick for the past 3 weeks, hopping this will find ye the same," his spelling and construction can be excused in view of the fact that his intention is good and that he is doing his best to serve his own turn without depending upon others. The nature, substance, and tone of any letter depend upon the occasion that calls it forth, upon the person writing it, and upon the person for whom it is intended. Whether it should be easy or formal in style, plain or ornate, light or serious, gay or grave, sentimental or matter of fact, depend upon these 3 circumstances. In letter writing the first and most important requisites are to be natural and simple. There should be no straining after effect, but simply a spontaneous outpouring of thoughts and ideas as they naturally occur to the writer. We are repelled by a person who is stiff and labored in his conversation, and in the same way the stiff and labored letter bores the reader, whereas if it is light and in a conversational vein, it immediately engages his attention. The letter which is written with the greatest facility is the best kind of letter, because it naturally expresses what is in the writer. He has not to search for his words, they flow in a perfect unison with the ideas he desires to communicate. When you write to your friend John Brown to tell him how you spent Sunday, you have not to look around for the words or study set phrases with a view to please or impress Brown. You just tell him, the same as if he were present before you, how you spent the day, where you were, with whom you associated, and the chief incidents that occurred during the time. Thus you write natural, and it is such writing that is adapted to epistolary correspondence. There are different kinds of letters, each calling for a different style of address and composition. Nevertheless, the natural key should be maintained in all, that is to say, the writer should never attempt to convey an impression that he is other than what he is. It would be silly as well as vain for the common street laborer of a limited education to try to put on literary airs and emulate a college professor. He may have as good a brain, but it is not as well developed by education, and he lacks the polish which society confers. When writing a letter, the street laborer should bear in mind that only the letter of a street laborer is expected from him, no matter to whom his communication may be addressed, and that neither the grammar nor the diction of a Chesterfield or Gladstone is looked for in his language. Still, the writer should keep in mind the person to whom he is writing. If it is to an archbishop or some other great dignitary of church or state, it certainly should be couched in terms different from those he uses to John Brown, his intimate friend. Just as he cannot say, "Dear John," to an archbishop, no more can he address him in the familiar words he uses to his friend of everyday acquaintance and companionship. Yet there is no great learning required to write to an archbishop, no more than to an ordinary individual. All the laborer needs to know is the form of address and how to properly utilize his limited vocabulary to the best advantage. Here is the form for such a letter: 17 2nd Avenue, New York City, January 1st, 1910. Most Reverend P. A. Jordan, Archbishop of New York. Most Reverend and dear Sir: While sweeping the crossing at 5th Avenue and 50th Street on last Wednesday morning, I found the enclosed $50 bill, which I am sending to you in the hope that it may be restored to the rightful owner. I beg you will acknowledge receipt, and should the owner be found I trust you will notify me, so that I may claim some reward for my honesty. I am, most Reverend and dear Sir, very respectfully yours, Thomas Jones. Observe the brevity of the letter. Jones makes no suggestions to the Archbishop how to find the owner, for he knows the course the Archbishop will adopt of having the finding of the bill announced from the church pulpits. Could Jones himself find the owner, there would be no occasion to apply to the Archbishop. This letter, it is true, is different from that which he would send to Brown. Nevertheless, it is simple without being familiar, is just a plain statement, and is as much to the point for its purpose as if it were garnished with rhetoric and words of learned length and thundering sound. Letters may be divided into those of friendship, acquaintanceship, those of business relations, those written in an official capacity by public servants, those designed to teach, and those which give accounts of the daily happenings on the stage of life, in other words, newsletters. Letters of friendship are the most common, and their style and form depend upon the degree of relationship and intimacy existing between the writers and those addressed. Between relatives and intimate friends, the beginning and end may be in the most familiar form of conversation, either affectionate or playful. They should, however, never overstep the boundaries of decency and propriety, for it is well to remember that, unlike conversation, which is only heard by the ears for which it is intended, written words may come under other eyes than those for whom they were designed. Therefore it is well never to write anything which the world may not read without detriment to your character or your instincts. You can be joyful, playful, jocose, give vent to your feelings, but never stoop to low language, and above all to language savoring in the slightest degree of moral impropriety. Business letters are of the utmost importance on account of the interests involved. The business character of a man or of a firm is often judged by the correspondence. On many occasions, letters, instead of developing trade and business interests and gaining clientele, predispose people unfavorably towards those whom they are designed to benefit. Ambiguous, slipshod language is a detriment to success. Business letters should be clear, concise, to the point, and above all honest, giving no wrong impressions or holding out any inducements that cannot be fulfilled. In business letters, just as in business conduct, honesty is always the best policy. Official letters are mostly always formal. They should possess clearness, brevity, and dignity of tone to impress the receivers with the proper respect for the national laws and institutions. Letters designed to teach, or didactic letters, are in a class all by themselves. They are simply literature in the form of letters, and are employed by some of the best writers to give their thoughts and ideas a greater emphasis. The most conspicuous example of this kind of composition is the book on etiquette by Lord Chesterfield, which took the form of a series of letters to his son. News letters are accounts of world happenings and descriptions of ceremonies and events sent into the newspapers. Some of the best authors of our time are newspaper men who write in an easy, flowing style which is most readable, full of humor and fancy, and which carries one along with breathless interest from beginning to end. The principal parts of a letter are 1. The heading or introduction. 2. The body or substance of the letter. 3. The subscription or closing expression and signature. 4. The address or direction on the envelope. For the body of a letter no forms or rules can be laid down, as it altogether depends upon the nature of the letter and the relationship between the writer and the person addressed. There are certain rules which govern the other three features and which custom has sanctioned. Everyone should be acquainted with these rules. The heading. The heading has three parts, viz., the name of the place, the date of writing, and the designation of the person or persons addressed. Thus, 73 New Street, Newark, New Jersey, February 1st, 1910. Messrs. Ginn and Company, New York. Gentlemen. The name of the place should never be omitted. In cities, street and number should always be given, and except when the city is large and very conspicuous, so that there can be no question as to its identity with another of the same or similar name, the abbreviation of the state should be appended, as in the above. Newark, N.J. There is another Newark in the State of Ohio. Owing to failure to comply with this rule, many letters go astray. The date should be on every letter, especially business letters. The date should never be put at the bottom in a business letter, but in friendly letters this may be done. The designation of the person or persons addressed differs according to the relations of the correspondents. Letters of friendship may begin in many ways according to the degrees of friendship or intimacy. Thus, my dear wife, my dear husband, my dear friend, my darling mother, my dearest love, dear aunt, dear uncle, dear George, etc. To mark a lesser degree of intimacy, such formal designations as the following may be employed: Dear Sir, my dear Sir, dear Mr. Smith, dear Madam, etc. For clergymen who have the degree of Doctor of Divinity, the designation is as follows: Reverend Alban Johnson, D.D. My dear Sir, or Reverend and dear Sir, or more familiarly, Dear Dr. Johnson. Bishops of the Roman and Anglican communions are addressed as Right Reverend. The Right Reverend the Bishop of Long Island, or the Right Reverend Frederick Burgess, Bishop of Long Island. Right Reverend and dear Sir. Archbishops of the Roman Church are addressed as Most Reverend, and cardinals as Eminence. Thus, the Most Reverend Archbishop Katzer. Most Reverend and dear Sir. His Eminence James Cardinal Gibbons, Archbishop of Baltimore. May it please your Eminence. The title of the governor of a state or territory and of the President of the United States is Excellency. However, Honorable is more commonly applied to governors. His Excellency William Howard Taft, President of the United States. Sir. His Excellency Charles Evans Hughes, Governor of the State of New York. Sir. Honorable Franklin Fort, Governor of New Jersey. Sir. The general salutation for officers of the Army and Navy is Sir. The rank and station should be indicated in full at the head of the letter, thus: General Joseph Thompson, commanding the 7th Infantry. Sir. Rear Admiral Robert Atkinson, commanding the Atlantic Squadron. Sir. The title of officers of the civil government is Honorable, and they are addressed as Sir. Honorable Nelson Duncan, Senator from Ohio. Sir. Honorable Norman Wingfield, Secretary of the Treasury. Sir. Honorable Rupert Gresham, Mayor of New York. Sir. Presidents and professors of colleges and universities are generally addressed as Sir or Dear Sir. Professor Ferguson Jenks, President of University. Sir or Dear Sir. Presidents of societies and associations are treated as businessmen and addressed as Sir or Dear Sir. Mr. Joseph Banks, President of the Night Owls. Dear Sir or Sir. Doctors of medicine are addressed as Sir, my dear Sir, and more familiarly, my dear Doctor or Dear Doctor, as Ryerson Pitkin, M.D. Sir, Dear Sir, my dear Doctor. Ordinary people with no degrees or titles are addressed as Mr. and Mrs. and are designed Dear Sir, Dear Madam, and an unmarried woman of any age is addressed on the envelope as Miss So and So, but always designed in the letter as Dear Madam. The plural of Mr., as in addressing a firm, is Messrs., and the corresponding salutation is Dear Sirs or Gentlemen. In England, Esquire is used for Mr. as a mark of slight superiority, and in this country it is sometimes used, but it is practically obsolete. Custom is against it, and American sentiment as well. If it is used, it should only be applied to lawyers and justices of the peace. Subscription. The subscription, or ending of a letter, consists of the term of respect or affection and the signature. The term depends upon the relation of the person addressed. Letters of friendship can close with such expressions as yours lovingly, yours affectionately, devotedly yours, ever yours, etc., as between husbands and wives or between lovers. Such gushing terminations as your own darling, your own dovey, and other pet and silly endings should be avoided, as they denote shallowness. Love can be strongly expressed without dipping into the nonsensical and the farcical. Formal expressions of subscription are Yours sincerely, Yours truly, Respectfully yours, and the like, and these may be varied to denote the exact bearing or attitude the writer wishes to assume to the person addressed, as Very sincerely yours, Very respectfully yours, With deep respect yours, Yours very truly, etc. Such elaborate endings as In the meantime with the highest respect I am yours to command. I have the honor to be, sir, your humble servant. With great expression of esteem I am sincerely yours. Believe me, my dear sir, ever faithfully yours, are condemned as savoring too much of affectation. It is better to finish formal letters without any such qualifying remarks. If you are writing to Mr. Ryan to tell him you have a house for sale, after describing the house and stating the terms, simply sign yourself, Your obedient servant, Yours very truly, Yours with respect, James Wilson. Don't say you have the honor to be anything or ask him to believe anything. All you want to tell him is that you have a house for sale and that you are sincere, or hold him in respect as a prospective customer. Don't abbreviate the signature as Yours respectfully and always make your sex obvious. Write plainly, Yours truly, John Field, and not J. Field, so that the person to whom you send it may not take you for Jane Field. It is always best to write the first name in full. Married women should prefix Mrs. to their names, as Very sincerely yours, Mrs. Theodore Watson. If you are sending a letter acknowledging a compliment or some kindness done, you may say Yours gratefully or Yours very gratefully, in proportion to the act of kindness received. It is not customary to sign letters of degrees or titles after your name, except you are a Lord, Earl, or Duke, and only known by the title, but as we have no such titles in America it is unnecessary to bring this matter into consideration. Don't sign yourself Sincerely yours, Obadiah Jackson, M.A., or LL.D. If you're an M.A. or an LL.D. people generally know it without your sounding your own trumpet. Many people, and especially clergymen, are fond of flaunting after their names degrees they have received honoris causa, that is, degrees as a mark of honor without examination. Such degrees should be kept in the background. Many a deadhead has these degrees which he could never have earned by brain work. Married women whose husbands are alive may sign the husband's name with the prefix Mrs. Thus, Yours sincerely, Mrs. William Southey. But when the husband is dead, the signature should be Yours sincerely, Mrs. Sarah Southey. So when we receive a letter from a woman we are enabled to tell whether she has a husband living or is a widow. A woman separated from her husband but not a divorcee should not sign his name. Address. The address of a letter consists of the name, the title, and the residence. Mr. Hugh Black, 112 Southgate Street, Altoona, Pennsylvania. Intimate friends have often familiar names for each other, such as pet names, nicknames, etc., which they use in the freedom of conversation, but such names should never, under any circumstances, appear on the envelope. The subscription on the envelope should always be written with propriety and correctness and as if penned by an entire stranger. The only difficulty in the envelope inscription is the title. Every man is entitled to Mr., and every lady to Mrs., and every unmarried lady to Miss. Even a boy is entitled to Master. When more than one is addressed, the title is Messrs. Mesdames is sometimes written of women. If the person addressed has a title, it is courteous to use it, but titles never must be duplicated. Thus we can write Robert Stitt, M.D., but never Dr. Robert Stitt, M.D., or Mr. Robert Stitt, M.D. In writing to a medical doctor it is well to indicate his profession by the letters M.D., so as to differentiate him from a D.D. It is better to write Robert Stitt, M.D., than Dr. Robert Stitt. In the case of clergymen the prefix Reverend is retained even when they have other titles, as Reverend Tracy Tooke, LL.D. When a person has more titles than one it is customary to only give him the leading one. Thus, instead of writing Reverend Samuel Macomb, B.A., M.A., B.Sc., Ph.D., LL.D., D.D., the form employed is Reverend Samuel Macomb, LL.D. LL.D. is appended in preference to D.D. because in most cases the Rev implies a D.D., while comparatively few with the prefix Rev are entitled to LL.D. In the case of Honorables, such as governors, judges, members of Congress, and others of the civil government, the prefix Hon. does away with Mr. and Esquire. Thus we write Honorable Josiah Snifkins, not Honorable Mr. Josiah Snifkins or Honorable Josiah Snifkins, Esquire. Though this prefix HON is also often applied to governors, they should be addressed as Excellency. For instance, His Excellency Charles E. Hughes, Albany, New York. In writing to the President, the superscription on the envelope should be To the President, Executive Mansion, Washington, D.C. Professional men, such as doctors and lawyers, as well as those having legitimately earned college degrees, may be addressed on the envelopes by their titles, as Jonathan Janeway, M.D., Hubert Houston, B.L., Matthew Marks, M.A., etc. The residence of the person addressed should be plainly written out in full. The street and numbers should be given and the city or town written very legibly. If the abbreviation of the state is liable to be confounded or confused with that of another, then the full name of the state should be written. In writing the residence on the envelope, instead of putting it all in one line, as is done at the head of a letter, each item of the residence forms a separate line. Thus, Liberty, Sullivan County, New York. 215 Minna Street, San Francisco, California. There should be left a space for the postage stamp in the upper right-hand corner. The name and title should occupy a line that is about central between the top of the envelope and the bottom. The name should be neither too much to right or left, but located in the center, the beginning and end at equal distances from either end. In writing to large business concerns which are well known or to public or city officials, it is sometimes customary to leave out number and street. Thus, Messrs. Siegel Cooper Company, New York City. Honorable William J. Gaynor, New York City. Notes. Notes may be regarded as letters in miniature confined chiefly to invitations, acceptances, regrets, and introductions, and modern etiquette tends towards informality of their composition. Card etiquette, in fact, has taken the place of ceremonious correspondence, and informal notes are now the rule. Invitations to dinner and receptions are now mostly written on cards. Regrets are sent back on visiting cards with just the one word, regrets, plainly written thereon. Often on cards and notes of invitation we find the letters RSVP at the bottom. These letters stand for the French Répondez s'il vous plaît, which means reply if you please. But there is no necessity to put this on an invitation card, as every well-bred person knows that a reply is expected. In writing notes to young ladies of the same family, it should be noted that the eldest daughter of the house is entitled to the designation Miss, without any Christian name, only the surname appended. Thus, if there are 3 daughters in the Thompson family, Martha, the eldest, Susan, and Jemima, Martha is addressed as Miss Thompson, and the other 2 as Miss Susan Thompson and Miss Jemima Thompson, respectively. Don't write the word addressed on the envelope of a note. Don't seal a note delivered by a friend. Don't write a note on a postal card. Here are a few common forms. Formal invitations. Mr. and Mrs. Henry Wagstaff request the honor of Mr. McAdoo's presence on Friday evening, June 15th, at 8 o'clock to meet the Governor of the Fort. 19 Woodbine Terrace, June 8th, 1918. This is an invitation to a formal reception calling for evening dress. Here is Mr. McAdoo's reply in the third person. Mr. McAdoo presents his compliments to Mr. and Mrs. Henry Wagstaff and accepts with great pleasure their invitation to meet the Governor of the Fort on the evening of June 15th. 215 Beacon Street, June 10th, 1910. Here is how Mr. McAdoo might decline the invitation. Mr. McAdoo regrets that owing to a prior engagement he must forego the honor of paying his respects to Mr. and Mrs. Wagstaff and the Governor of the Fort on the evening of June 15th. 215 Beacon Street, June 10th, 1910. Here is a note addressed, say, to Mr. Jeremiah Reynolds. Mr. and Mrs. Oldham at home on Wednesday evening, October 9th from 7 to 11. 21 Ashland Avenue, October 5th. Mr. Reynolds makes reply. Mr. Reynolds accepts with high appreciation the honor of Mr. and Mrs. Oldham's invitation for Wednesday evening, October 9th. Windsor Hotel, October 7th. Or, Mr. Reynolds regrets that his duties render it impossible for him to accept Mr. and Mrs. Oldham's kind invitation for the evening of October 9th. Windsor Hotel, October 7th. Sometimes less informal invitations are sent on small, specially designed note paper in which the first person takes the place of the third. Thus, 360 Pine Street, December 11th, 1910. Dear Mr. Saintsbury, Mr. Johnson and I should be much pleased to have you dine with us and a few friends next Thursday the 15th at 7:30. Yours sincerely, Emma Burnside. Mr. Saintsbury's reply. 57 Carlisle Strand, December 13th, 1910. Dear Mrs. Burnside, let me accept very appreciatively your invitation to dine with Mr. Burnside and you on next Thursday the 15th at 7:30. Yours sincerely, Henry Saintsbury. Mrs. Alexander Burnside. Notes of Introduction. Notes of introduction should be very circumspect as the writers are in reality vouching for those whom they introduce. Here is a specimen of such a note. 603 Lexington Avenue, New York City, June 15th, 1910. Rev. Cyrus C. Wiley, D.D., Newark, New Jersey. My dear Dr. Wiley, I take the liberty of presenting to you my friend Stacy Redfern, M.D., a young practitioner, who is anxious to locate in Newark. I have known him many years and can vouch for his integrity and professional standing. Any courtesy and kindness which you may show him will be very much appreciated by me. Very sincerely yours, Franklin Jewett. End of Chapter 6.
How to Speak and Write Correctly by Joseph Devlin. Chapter 7. Errors. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 7. Errors. Mistakes, slips of authors, examples and corrections. Errors of redundancy. In the following examples, the word or words in parentheses and emphasized are uncalled for and should be omitted. 1. Fill the glass full. 2. They appeared to be talking together on private affairs. 3. I saw the boy and his sister both in the garden. 4. He went into the country last week and returned back yesterday. 5. The subject matter of his discourse was excellent. 6. You need not wonder that the subject matter of his discourse was excellent. It was taken from the Bible. 7. They followed after him, but could not overtake him. 8. The same sentiments may be found throughout the whole of the book. I was very ill every day of my life last week. 10. That was the sum and substance of his discourse. 11. He took wine and water and mixed them both together. 12. He descended down the steps to the cellar. 13. He fell down from the top of the house. 14. I hope you will return again soon. 15. The things he took away he restored again. 16. The thief who stole my watch was compelled to restore it back again. 17. It is equally the same to me whether I have it today or tomorrow. 18. She says the report is false. And he replied, says he, if it be not correct, I have been misinformed. 19. I took my place in the cars to go to New York. 20. They need not to call upon him. 21. Nothing else but that would satisfy him. 22. Whenever I ride in the cars, I always find it prejudicial to my health. 23. He was the first of all at the meeting. 24. He was the tallest of all the brothers. 25. You are the tallest of all your family. 26. Whenever I pass the house, he is always at the door. 27. The rain has penetrated through the roof. 28. Besides my uncle and aunt, there was also my grandfather at the church. 29. It should ever be your constant endeavor to please your family. 30. If it is true, as you have heard, then his situation is indeed pitiful. 31. Either this here man or that there woman has got it. 32. Where is the fire at? 33. Did you sleep in church? Not that I know of. 34. I have never before in my life met with such a stupid man. 35. 4. Why did he postpone it? 36. Because why he could not attend. 37. What age is he? Why, I don't know. 38. He called on me to ask my opinion. 39. I don't know where I am at. 40. I looked in at the window. 41. I passed by the house. 42. He always came every Saturday. 43. Moreover, also, we wish to say he was in error. 44. It is not long ago since he was here. 45. 2 men went into the wood in order to cut down trees. Further examples of redundancy might be multiplied. It is very common in newspaper writing where not alone single words but entire phrases are sometimes brought in, which are unnecessary to the sense or explanation of what is written. Grammatical errors of standard authors. Even the best speakers and writers are sometimes caught napping. Many of our standard authors to whom we have been accustomed to look up as infallible have sinned more or less against the fundamental principles of grammar by breaking the rules regarding one or more of the 9 parts of speech. In fact, some of them have recklessly trespassed against all 9, and still they sit on their pedestals of fame for the admiration of the crowd. Macaulay mistreated the article. He wrote that a historian should not record trifles is perfectly true. He should have used an. Dickens also used the article incorrectly. He refers to Robinson Crusoe as an universally popular book instead of a universally popular book. The relation between nouns and pronouns has always been a stumbling block to speakers and writers. Hallam, in his Literature of Europe, writes, "No one as yet had exhibited the structure of the human kidneys, Vesalius having only examined them in dogs." This means that Vesalius examined human kidneys in dogs. The sentence should have been, "No one has yet exhibited the kidneys in human beings, Vesalius having examined such organs in dogs only." Sir Arthur Helps, in writing of Dickens, states, "I knew a brother author of his who received such criticisms from him (Dickens) very lately, and profited by it. Instead of it, the word should be them to agree with criticisms." Here are a few other pronomial errors from leading authors. Sir Thomas More in general so writes it, although not many others so late as him. Should be he. Trench's English Past and Present. What should we gain by it, but that we should speedily become as poor as them? Should be they. Alison's Essay on Macaulay. If the king gives us leave, you or I may as lawfully preach as them that do. Should be they or those, the latter having persons understood. Hobbes's History of Civil Wars. The drift of all his sermons was to prepare the Jews for the reception of a prophet mightier than him, and whose shoes he was not worthy to bear. Should be he. Atterbury's Sermons. Phalaris, who was so much older than her, should be she. Bentley's Dissertation on Phalaris. King Charles, and more than him, the Duke and the Popish faction, were at liberty to form new schemes. Should be than he in Bolingbroke's Dissertation on Parties. We contributed a third more than the Dutch, who were obliged to the same proportion more than us. Should be than we. Swift's Conduct of the Allies. In all the above examples the objective cases of the pronouns have been used while the construction calls for the nominative case. Let thou and I the battle try. Anonymous. Here let is the governing verb and requires an objective case after it. Therefore instead of thou and I the word should be you, singular, and me. Forever in this humble cell let thee and I, my fair one, dwell. Prior. Here thee and I should be the objectives you and me. The use of the relative pronoun trips the greatest number of authors. Even in the Bible we find the relatively wrongly translated, "Whom do men say that I am?" in St. Matthew. "Whom think ye that I am?" the Acts of the Apostles. Who should be written in both cases because the word is not in the objective, governed by say or think, but in the nominative, dependent on the verb am. Who should I meet at the coffee house t'other night but my old friend Steele? It is another pattern of this answerer's fair dealing to give us hints that the author is dead, and yet lay the suspicion upon somebody, I know not who, in the country. Swift's Tale of a Tub. My son is going to be married to I don't know who. Goldsmith's Good-Natured Man. The nominative who in the above examples should be the objective whom. The plural nominative ye of the pronoun thou is very often used for the objective you, as in the following. His wrath, which will one day destroy ye both. Milton. The more shame for ye, holy men, I thought ye. Shakespeare. I feel the gales that from ye blow. Gray. Tyrants dread ye lest your just decree transfer the power and set the people free. Prior. Many of the great writers have played havoc with the adjective in the indiscriminate use of the degrees of comparison. Of two forms of the same word use the fittest. Morel. The author here, in trying to give good advice, sets a bad example. He should have used the comparative degree fitter. Adjectives which have a comparative or superlative signification do not admit the addition of the words more, most, or the terminations est. Hence the following examples break this rule. Money is the most universal incitement of human misery. Gibbon's Decline and Fall. The chiefest of which was known by the name Archon among the Grecians. Dryden's Life of Plutarch. The chiefest and largest are removed to certain magazines they call libraries. Swift's The Battle of the Books. The two chiefest properties of air, its gravity and elastic force, have been discovered by mechanical experiments. Arbuthnot. From these various causes, which in greater or lesser degree affect every individual in the colony, the indignation of the people became general. Robertson's History of America. The extremest parts of the earth were meditating a submission. Atterbury's Sermons. From these various causes, which in greater or lesser degree affected every individual in the colony, the ingredients of the people became general. Robertson's History of America. The extremest parts of the earth were meditating a submission. Atterbury's Sermons. The last are indeed more preferable, because they are founded on some new knowledge or improvement in the mind of man. Addison, Spectator. This was, in reality, the easiest manner of the two. Shaftesbury, Advice to an Author. In every well-formed mind, this second desire seemed to be the strongest of the two. Smith's Theory of Moral Sentiments. In these examples, the superlative is wrongly used for the comparative. When only two objects are compared, the comparative form must be used. of impossibility there are no degrees of comparison, yet we find the following. As it was impossible they should know the words, thoughts, and secret actions of all men, so it was more impossible they should pass judgment on them according to these things. Whitby's Necessity of the Christian Religion. A great number of authors employ adjectives for adverbs. Thus we find, I shall endeavor to live hereafter suitable to a man in my station. Addison. I can never think so very mean of him. Bentley's Dissertation on Phalaris. His expectations run high, and the fund to supply them is extreme scanty. Lancaster's Essay on Delicacy. The commonest error in the use of the verb is the disregard of the concord between the verb and its subject. This occurs most frequently when the subject and the verb are widely separated, especially if some other noun of a different number immediately precedes the verb. False concords occur very often after either, or, neither, nor, and much, more, many, everyone, each. Here are a few authors' slips. The terms in which the sale of a patent were communicated to the public. Junius's Letters. The richness of her arms and apparel were conspicuous. Gibbon's Decline and Fall. Every one of this grotesque family were the creatures of national genius. Disraeli. He knows not what spleen, languor, or listlessness are. Blair's Sermons. Each of these words imply some pursuit or object relinquished. Blair's Sermons. Magnus, with 4,000 of his supposed accomplices, were put to death. Gibbon. No nation gives greater encouragement to learning than we do, yet at the same time none are so injudicious in the application. Goldsmith. There's 2 or 3 of us have seen strange sights. Shakespeare. The past participle should not be used for the past tense, yet the learned Byron overlooked this fact. He thus writes in the Lament of Tasso, "And with my years my soul begun to pant with feeling of strange tumult and soft pain." Here is another example from Savage Wanderer in which there is double sinning. From liberty each nobler science sprung, a Bacon brightened and a Spencer sung. Other breaches in regard to the participles occur in the following. Every book ought to be read with the same spirit and the same manner as it is writ. Fielding's Tom Jones. The court of Augustus had not wore off the manners of the Republic. Hume's Essays. Moses tells us that the fountains of the earth were broke open or clove asunder. Burnet. A free constitution when it has been shook by the iniquity of former administrations. Bolingbroke. In this respect the seeds of future divisions were sowed abundantly. Bolingbroke. In the following example the present participle is used for the infinitive mood. It is easy distinguishing the rude fragment of a rock from the splinter of a statue. Gilfillan's Literary Portraits. Distinguishing here should be replaced by to distinguish. The rules regarding shall and will are violated in the following. If we look within the rough and awkward outside, we will be richly rewarded by its perusal. Gilfillan's Literary Portraits. If I should declare them and speak of them, they should be more than I am able to express. Prayer Book Revision of Psalm 11. If I would declare them and speak of them, they are more than can be numbered. Prayer Book Revision of Psalms 11. Without having attended to this, we will be at a loss in understanding several passages in the classics. Blair's Lectures. We know to what cause our past reverses have been owing, and we will have ourselves to blame if they are again incurred. Alison's History of Europe. Adverbial mistakes often occur in the best writers. The adverb rather is a word very frequently misplaced. Archbishop Trench, in his English Past and Present, writes, "It rather modified the structure of our sentences than the elements of our vocabulary." This should have been written, "It modified the structure of our sentences rather than the elements of our vocabulary." So far as his mode of teaching goes, he is rather a disciple of Socrates than of St. Paul or Wesley. Thus writes Leslie Stevens of Dr. Johnson. He should have written, "So far as his mode of teaching goes, he is a disciple of Socrates rather than of St. Paul or Wesley's." The preposition is a part of speech which is often wrongly used by some of the best writers. Certain nouns, adjectives, and verbs require particular prepositions after them. For instance, the word different always takes the preposition from after it. Prevail takes upon. Adverse takes to. Accord takes with, and so on. In the following examples, the prepositions in parentheses and emphasized are the ones that should have been used. He found the greatest difficulty in writing. Hume's History of English. If a policy can prevail upon, over, force. Addison. He made the discovery and communicated to, with, his friends. Swift's Tale of a Tub. Every office of command should be entrusted to persons in, whom the Parliament shall confide. Macaulay. Several of the most celebrated writers infringe the canons of style by placing prepositions at the end of sentences. For instance, Carlyle, in referring to the study of Burns, writes, "Our own contributions to it, we are aware, can be but scanty and feeble, but we offer them with good will, and trust they may meet with acceptance from those they are intended for whom they are intended," he should have written. Most writers have some one vein which they peculiarly and obviously excel in. William Minto. This sentence should read, "Most writers have some one vein in which they peculiarly and obviously excel." Many authors use redundant words which repeat the same thought and idea. This is called tautology. Notwithstanding which, however, poor Polly embraced them all around. Dickens. I judged that they would mutually find each other. Crockett. As having created a joint partnership between the two powers in the Morocco question. The Times. The only sensible position there seems to be is to frankly acknowledge our ignorance of what lies beyond. Daily Telegraph. Lord Rosebery has not budgeted from his position, splendid no doubt, of lonely isolation. The Time. Miss Fox was often in the habit of assuring Mrs. Chick. Dickens. The deck, it was their field of fame. Campbell. He had come up one morning, as was now frequently his wont. Trollope. The counsellors of the Sultan continue to remain skeptical. The Times. Seriously, and apart from jesting, this is no light matter. Bagehot. To go back to your own country with the consciousness that you go back with, the sense of duty well done. Lord Halsbury. The Peresviet lost both her fighting tops and, in appearance, looked the most damaged of all the ships. The Times. Counsel admitted that was a fair suggestion to make, but he submitted that it was borne out by the surrounding circumstances. The Times. Another unnecessary use of words and phrases is that which is termed circumlocution, going around the bush when there is no occasion for it, save to fill space. It may be likened to a person walking the distance of two sides of a triangle to reach the objective point. For instance, in the quotation, Pope professed to have learned his poetry from Dryden, whom, whenever an opportunity was presented, he praised through the whole period of his existence with unrivalled liberality, and perhaps his character may receive some illustration of a comparison he instituted between him and the man whose pupil he was. Much of the verbiage may be eliminated in the sentence thus condensed. Pope professed himself the pupil of Dryden, whom he lost no opportunity of praising, and his character may be illustrated by a comparison with his master. His life was brought to a close in 1910, at an age not far from the one fixed by the sacred writer as the term of human existence. This in brevity can be put: his life was brought to a close at the age of 70. Or better yet, he died at the age of 70. The day was intensely cold, so cold in fact that the thermometer crept down to the 0 mark. Can be expressed, the day was so cold the thermometer registered 0. Many authors resort to circumlocution for the purpose of padding, that is, filling space, or when they strike a snag in writing upon subjects of which they know little or nothing. The young writer should steer clear of it, and learn to express his thoughts and ideas as briefly as possible, commensurate with lucidity of expression. Volumes of errors, in fact, in grammar, diction, and general style, could be selected from the works of the great writers, a fact which eloquently testifies that no one is infallible, and that the very best is liable to err at times. However, most of the erring in the case of these writers arises from carelessness or hurry, not from lack of knowledge. As a general rule, it is in writing that the scholar is liable to slip. In oral speech he seldom makes a blunder. In fact, there are many people who are perfect masters of speech, who never make a blunder in conversation, yet who are ignorant of the very principles of grammar and would not know how to write a sentence correctly on paper. Such persons have been accustomed from infancy to hear the language spoken correctly, and so the use of the proper words and the forms becomes a second nature to them. A child can learn what is right as easy as what is wrong, and whatever impressions are made on the mind when it is plastic will remain there. Even a parrot can be taught the proper use of language. Repeat to a parrot, 2 and 2 make 4, and it will never say 2 and 2 makes 4. In writing, however, it is different. Without a knowledge of the fundamentals of grammar, we may be able to speak correctly from association with good speakers, but without such a knowledge we cannot hope to write the language correctly. To write even a common letter, we must know the principles of construction, the relationship of one word to another. Therefore, it is necessary for everybody to understand at least the essentials of the grammar of his own language. End of chapter 7.
Rate of how to speak and write correctly. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. How to Speak and Write Correctly by Joseph Devlin. Chapter 8. Pitfalls to Avoid. Common stumbling blocks, peculiar constructions, and misused forms. Attraction. Very often the verb is separated from its real nominative or subject by several intervening words, and in such cases one is liable to make the verb agree with the subject nearest to it. Here are a few examples, showing that the leading writers now and then take a tumble into this pitfall. Quote, "The partition which the two ministers made of the powers of government were singularly happy." Unquote. Macaulay. Were should be was to agree with its subject partition. Quote, "One at least of the qualities which fit it for training ordinary men unfit it for training an extraordinary man." Unquote. Bagehot. Unfit should be unfits to agree with the subject one. Quote, The Tibetans have engaged to exclude from their country those dangerous influences whose appearance were the chief cause of our action." Unquote. The Times. Were should be was to agree with appearance. Quote, "An immense amount of confusion and indifference prevail in these days." Unquote. The Telegraph. Prevail should be prevails to agree with amount. Ellipsis. Errors in ellipsis occur chiefly with prepositions. His objection and condoning of the boy's course seemed, to say the least, paradoxical. The preposition to should come after objection. Many men of brilliant parts are crushed by force of circumstances, and their genius forever lost to the world. Some maintain that the missing verb after genius is are, but such is ungrammatical. In such cases the right verb should be always expressed as "their genius is forever lost to the world." The split infinitive. Even the best speakers and writers are in the habit of placing a modifying word or words between the to and the remaining part of the infinitive. It is possible that such will come to be looked upon in time as the proper form, but at present the splitting of the infinitive is decidedly wrong. He was scarcely able to even talk. She commenced to rapidly walk around the room. To have really loved is better than not to have at all loved. In these constructions it is much better not to split the infinitive. In everyday speech, the best speakers sin against this observance. In New York City there is a certain magistrate, a member of the 400, who prides himself on his diction in language. He tells this story. A prisoner, a faded, battered specimen of mankind, on whose haggard face, deeply lined with the marks of dissipation, there still lingered faint reminders of better days long past, stood dejected before the judge. "Where are you from?" asked the magistrate. "From Boston," answered the accused. "Indeed," said the judge, "indeed yours is a sad case. And yet you don't seem to thoroughly realize how low you have sunk." The man stared as if struck. "Your Honour does me an injustice," he said bitterly. "The disgrace of arrest for drunkenness, the mortification of being thrust into a noisome dungeon, the publicity and humiliation of trial in a crowded and dingy courtroom I can bear, but to be sentenced by a police magistrate who splits his infinitives, that is indeed the last blow." 1. The indefinite adjective pronoun one, when put in place of a personal substantive, is liable to raise confusion. When a sentence or expression is begun with the impersonal one, the word must be used throughout in all references to the subject. Thus, "One must mind one's own business if one wishes to succeed." May seem prolix and awkward, nevertheless it is the proper form. You must not say, "One must mind his business if he wishes to succeed," for the subject is impersonal, and therefore cannot exclusively take the masculine pronoun. With anyone it is different. You may say, "If anyone sins, he should acknowledge it. Let him not try to hide it by another sin." Only. This is a word that is a pitfall to the most of us, whether learned or unlearned. Probably it is the most indiscriminately used word in the language. From the different positions it is made to occupy in a sentence, it can relatively change the meaning. For instance, in the sentence, "I only struck him that time," The meaning to be inferred is that the only thing I did to him was to strike him, not kick or otherwise abuse him. But if the only is shifted, so as to make the sentence read, I struck him only that time, the meaning conveyed is that only on that occasion and at no other time did I strike him. If another shift is made to I struck only him that time, the meaning is again altered so that it signifies he was the only person I struck. In speaking, we can by emphasis impress our meaning on our hearers, but in writing we have nothing to depend upon but the position of the word in the sentence. The best rule in regard to only is to place it immediately before the word or phrase it modifies or limits. Alone. Alone is another word which creates ambiguity and alters meaning. If we substitute it for only in the preceding example, the meaning of the sentence will depend upon the arrangement. Thus, I alone struck him at that time signifies that I and no other struck him. When the sentence reads, I struck him alone at that time, it must be interpreted that he was the only person that received a blow. Again, if it is made to read, I struck him at that time alone, the sense conveyed is that that was the only occasion on which I struck him. The rule which governs the correct use of only is also applicable to alone. Other and another. These are words which often give to expressions a meaning far from that intended. Thus, I have nothing to do with that other rascal across the street certainly means that I am a rascal myself. I sent the dispatch to my friend, but another villain intercepted it, clearly signifies that my friend is a villain. A good plan is to omit these words when they can be readily done without, as in the above examples, but when it is necessary to use them, make your meaning clear. You can do this by making each sentence or phrase in which they occur independent of contextual aid. And with the relative. Never use and with the relative in this manner. That is the dog I meant, and which I know is of pure breed. This is an error quite common. The use of and is permissible when there is a parallel relative in the preceding sentence or clause. Thus, there is the dog which I meant, and which I know is of pure breed, is quite correct. Loose participles. A participle or participial phrase is naturally referred to the nearest nominative. If only one nominative is expressed, it claims all the participles that are not by the construction of the sentence otherwise fixed. John, working in the field all day and getting thirsty, drank from the running stream. Here the participles working and getting clearly refer to John. But in the sentence, swept along by the mob, I could not save him, the participle, as it were, is lying around loose and may be taken to refer to either the person speaking or to the person spoken about. It may mean that I was swept along by the mob, or the individual whom I tried to save was swept along. Going into the store, the roof fell, can be taken that it was the roof which was going into the store when it fell. Of course, the meaning intended is that some person or persons were going into the store just as the roof fell. In all sentence construction with participles, there should be such clearness as to preclude all possibility of ambiguity. The participle should be so placed that there can be no doubt as to the noun to which it refers. Often it is advisable to supply such words as will make the meaning obvious. Broken construction. Sometimes the beginning of a sentence presents quite a different grammatical construction from its end. This arises from the fact probably that the beginning is lost sight of before the end is reached. This occurs frequently in long sentences. Thus, honesty, integrity, and square dealing will bring anybody much better through life than the absence of either. Here the construction is broken at than. The use of either, only used in referring to one of two, shows that the fact is forgotten that three qualities and not two are under consideration. Any one of the three meanings might be intended in the sentence, viz., absence of any one quality, absence of any two of the qualities, or absence of the whole three qualities. Either denotes one or the other of two, and should never be applied to any one of more than two. When we fall into the error of constructing such sentences as above, we should take them apart and reconstruct them in a different grammatical form. Thus, honesty, integrity, and square dealing will bring a man much better through life than a lack of these qualities, which are almost essential to success. Double negative. It must be remembered that two negatives in the English language destroy each other and are equivalent to an affirmative. Thus, I don't know nothing about it is intended to convey that I am ignorant of the matter under consideration, but it defeats its own purpose, inasmuch as the use of nothing implies that I know something about it. The sentence should read, I don't know anything about it. Often we hear such expressions as, he was not asked to give no opinion, expressing the very opposite of what is intended. This sentence implies that he was asked to give his opinion. The double negative, therefore, should be carefully avoided, for it is insidious and is liable to slip in, and the writer remain unconscious of its presence until the eye of the critic detects it. First personal pronoun. The use of the first personal pronoun should be avoided as much as possible in composition. Don't introduce it by way of apology, and never use such expressions as, in my opinion, as far as I can see, it appears to me, I believe, etc. In what you write, the whole composition is expressive of your views, since you are the author. Therefore, there is no necessity for you to accentuate or emphasize yourself at certain portions of it. Moreover, the big I's savour of egotism. Steer clear of them as far as you can. The only place where the first person is permissible is in passages where you are stating a view that is not generally held and which is likely to meet with opposition. Sequence of tenses. When two verbs depend on each other, their tenses must have a definite relation to each other. I shall have the pleasure in accepting your kind invitation is wrong, unless you really mean that just now you decline, though by and by you intend to accept. Or unless you mean that you do accept now, though you have no pleasure in doing so, but look forward to be more pleased by and by. In fact, the sequence of the compound tenses puzzles experienced writers. The best plan is to go back in thought to the time in question and use the tense you would then naturally use. Now in the sentence, I should have liked to have gone to see the circus, the way to find out the proper sequence is to ask yourself the question, what is it I should have liked to do? And the plain answer is, to go to see the circus. I cannot answer, to have gone to see the circus, for that would imply that at a certain moment I would have liked to be in the position of having gone to the circus. But I do not mean this. I mean that at the moment at which I am speaking, I wish I had gone to see the circus. The verbal phrase I should have liked carries me back to the time when there was a chance of seeing the circus, and once back at the time, the going to the circus is a thing of the present. This whole explanation resolves itself into the simple question, what should I have liked at that time? And the answer is, to go to see the circus. Therefore this is the proper sequence, and the expression should be, I should have liked to go to see the circus. If we wish to speak of something relating to a time prior to that indicated in the past tense, we must use the perfect tense of the infinitive, as, he appeared to have seen better days. We should say, I expected to meet him, not I expected to have met him. We intended to visit you, not to have visited you. I hoped they would arrive, not I hoped they would have arrived. I thought I should catch the bird, not I thought I should have caught the bird. I had intended to go to the meeting, not I had intended to have gone to the meeting. Between, among. These prepositions are often carelessly interchanged. Between has reference to two objects only, among to more than two. The money was equally divided between them is right when there are only two, but if there are more than two, it should be, the money was equally divided among them. Less, fewer. Less refers to quantity, fewer to number. No man has less virtues should be, no man has fewer virtues. The farmer had some oats and a fewer quantity of wheat should be, the farmer had some oats and a less quantity of wheat. Further, farther. Further is commonly used to denote quantity, farther to denote distance. I have walked farther than you. I need no further supply are correct. Each other, one another. Each other refers to two, one another to more than two. Jones and Smith quarrelled, they struck each other is correct. Jones, Smith and Brown quarrelled, they struck one another is also correct. Don't say, the two boys teach one another, or the three girls love each other. Each, every, either, neither. These words are continually misapplied. Each can be applied to two or any higher number of objects to signify every one of the number independently. Every requires more than two to be spoken of and denotes all the persons or things taken separately. Either denotes one or the other of two and should not be used to include both. Neither is the negative of either, denoting not the other and not the one, and relating to two persons or things considered separately. The following examples illustrate the correct usage of these words. Each man of the crew received a reward. Every man in the regiment displayed bravery. We can walk on either side of the street. Neither of the two is to blame. Neither nor. When two singular subjects are connected by neither nor, use a singular verb, as neither John nor James was there, not were there. None. Custom has sanctioned the use of this word both with the singular and plural, as none is so blind as he who will not see, and none are so blind as they who will not see. However, as it is a contraction of no one, it is better to use the singular verb. Rise, raise. These verbs are very often confounded. Rise is to move or pass upward in any manner, as to rise from bed, to increase in value, to improve in position or rank, as stocks rise, politicians rise, they have risen to honor. Raise is to lift up, to exalt, to enhance, as I raise the table, he raised his servant, the baker raised the price of bread. Lay, lie. The transitive verb lay and lay, the past tense of the neuter verb lie, are often confounded, though quite different in meaning. The neuter verb to lie, meaning to lie down or rest, cannot take the objective after it, except with a preposition. We can say, he lies on the ground, but we cannot say, he lies the ground, since the verb is neuter and intransitive, and as such cannot have a direct object. With lay it is different. Lay is a transitive verb, therefore it takes a direct object after it, as I lay a wager, I laid the carpet, etc. Of a carpet or any inanimate subject we should say, it lies on the floor. A knife lies on the table, not lays. But of a person we say, he lays the knife on the table, not he lies. Lay being the past tense of the neuter to lie, down, we should say, he lay on the bed, and lain being its past participle, we must also say, he has lain on the bed. We can say, I lay myself down, he laid himself down, and such expressions. It is imperative to remember in using these verbs that to lay means to do something, and to lie means to be in a state of rest. Says I said. Says I is a vulgarism. Don't use it. I said is the correct form. In, into. Be careful to distinguish the meaning of these two little prepositions and don't interchange them. Don't say, he went in the room, nor my brother is into the navy. In denotes the place where a person or thing, whether at rest or in motion, is present, and into denotes entrance. He went into the room, my brother is in the navy, are correct. Eat, ate. Don't confound the two. Eat is present, ate is past. I eat the bread means that I am continuing the eating. I ate the bread means that the act of eating is past. Eaten is the perfect participle, but often eat is used instead, and as it has the same pronunciation of ate, care should be taken to distinguish the past tense, I ate, from the perfect, I have eaten. Sequence of person. Remember that the first person takes precedence of the second, and the second takes precedence of the third. When Cardinal Wolsey said, Ego et rex, I and the king, he showed he was a good grammarian, but a bad courtier. Am come, have come. I am come points to my being here, while I have come intimates that I have just arrived. When the subject is not a person, the verb to be should be used in preference to the verb to have, as the box is come instead of the box has come. Past tense, past participle. The interchange of these two parts of the irregular or so-called strong verbs is, perhaps, the breach oftenest committed by careless speakers and writers. To avoid mistakes, it is requisite to know the principal parts of these verbs, and this knowledge is very easy of acquirement, as there are not more than a couple of hundred of such verbs, and of this number but a small part is in daily use. Here are some of the most common blunders. I seen for I saw. I done it for I did it. I drunk for I drank. I begun for I began. I rung for I rang. I run for I ran. I sung for I sang. I have chose for I have chosen. I have drove for I have driven. I have wore for I have worn. I have trod for I have trodden. I have shook for I have shaken. I have fell for I have fallen. I have drank for I have drunk. I have began for I have begun. I have rang for I have rung. I have rose for I have risen. I have spoke for I have spoken. I have broke for I have broken. It has froze for it has frozen. It has blowed for it has blown. It has flowed, of a bird, for it has flown. N.B. The past tense and past participle of to hang is hanged or hung. When you are talking about a man meeting death on the gallows, say, he was hanged. When you are talking about the carcass of an animal, say, it was hung, as the beef was hung dry. Also say your coat was hung on a hook. Prepositions and the objective case. Don't forget that prepositions always take the objective case. Don't say, between you and I, say, between you and me. Two prepositions should not govern one objective, unless there is an immediate connection between them. He was refused admission to and forcibly ejected from the school should be, he was refused admission to the school and forcibly ejected from it. Summon, summons. Don't say, I shall summons him, but I shall summon him. Summon is a verb, summons a noun. It is correct to say, I shall get a summons for him, but not a summon. Undeniable, unexceptionable. My brother has an undeniable character is wrong if I wish to convey the idea that he has a good character. The expression should be in that case, my brother has an unexceptionable character. An undeniable character is a character that cannot be denied, whether good or bad. An unexceptionable character is one to which no one can take exception. The pronouns. Very many mistakes occur in the use of the pronouns. Let you and I go should be let you and me go. Let them and we go should be let them and us go. The verb let is transitive and therefore takes the objective case. Give me them flowers should be give me those flowers. I mean them three should be I mean those three. Them is the objective case of the personal pronoun and cannot be used adjectively like the demonstrative adjective pronoun. I am as strong as him should be I am as strong as he. I am younger than her should be I am younger than she. He can write better than me should be he can write better than I. For in these examples the objective cases him, her and me are used wrongfully for the nominatives. After each of the misapplied pronouns a verb is understood, of which each pronoun is the subject. Thus, I am as strong as he is. I am younger than she is. He can write better than I can. Don't say, it is me. Say, it is I. The verb to be, of which is a part, takes the same case after it that it has before it. This holds good in all situations as well as with pronouns. The verb to be also requires the pronouns joined to it to be in the same case as a pronoun asking a question. The nominative I requires the nominative who, and the objectives me, him, her, its, you, and them require the objective whom. Whom do you think I am should be who do you think I am, and who do they suppose me to be should be whom do they suppose me to be. The objective form of the relative should be always used in connection with a preposition. Who do you take me for should be whom do, etc. Who did you give the apple to should be whom did you give the apple to. But as pointed out elsewhere, the preposition should never end a sentence. Therefore, it is better to say, to whom did you give the apple? After transitive verbs, always use the objective cases of the pronouns. For he and they we have seen, say him and them we have seen. That for so. The hurt, it was that painful it made me cry. Say, so painful. These, those. Don't say, these kind, those sort. Kind and sort are each singular and require the singular pronouns this and that. In connection with these demonstrative adjective pronouns, remember that this and these refer to what is near at hand, that and those to what is more distant, as this book near me, that book over there, these boys near, those boys at a distance. This much, thus much. This much is certain should be thus much, or so much is certain. Flee, fly. These are two separate verbs and must not be interchanged. The principal parts of flee are flee, fled, fled. Those of fly are fly, flew, flown. To flee is generally used in the meaning of getting out of danger. To fly means to soar as a bird. To say of a man, he has flown from the place, is wrong. It should be, he has fled from the place. We can say with propriety that a bird has flown from the place. Through, throughout. Don't say, he is well known through the land, but he is well known throughout the land. Vocation and avocation. Don't mistake these two words so nearly alike. Vocation is the employment, business or profession one follows for a living. Avocation is some pursuit or occupation which diverts the person from such employment, business or profession. Thus, his vocation was the law, his avocation farming. Was, were. In the subjunctive mood, the plural form were should be used with a singular subject, as if I were, not was. Remember the plural form of the personal pronoun you always takes were, though it may denote but one. Thus, you were, never you was. If I was him is a very common expression. Note the two mistakes in it, that of the verb implying a condition and that of the objective case of the pronoun. It should read, if I were he. This is another illustration of the rule regarding the verb to be, taking the same case after it as before it. Were is part of the verb to be. Therefore, as the nominative I goes before it, the nominative he should come after it. A or an. A becomes an before a vowel or before h mute for the sake of euphony or agreeable sound to the ear. An apple, an orange, an air, an honour, etc. End of chapter 8.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Andrew Lebrun, Boston, Massachusetts. How to Speak and Write Correctly by Joseph Devlin. Chapter 9. Style. Diction, purity, propriety, precision. It is the object of every writer to put his thoughts into as effective form as possible, so as to make a good impression on the reader. A person may have noble thoughts and ideas, but be unable to express them in such a way as to appeal to others. Consequently, he cannot exert the full force of his intellectuality, nor leave the imprint of his character upon his time, whereas many a man, but indifferently gifted, may wield such a facile pen as to attract attention and win for himself an envious place among his contemporaries. In everyday life, one sees illustrations of men of excellent mentality being cast aside, and ones of mediocre, or in some cases little if any ability, chosen to fill important places. The former are unable to impress their personality. They have great thoughts, great ideas, but these thoughts and ideas are locked up in their brains, and are like prisoners behind the bars, struggling to get free. The key of language which would open the door is wanting, hence they have to remain locked up. Many a man has to pass through the world unheard of, and of little benefit to it, or himself, simply because he cannot bring out what is in him and make it subservient to his will. It is the duty of everyone to develop his best, not only for the benefit of himself, but for the good of his fellow men. It is not at all necessary to have great learning or acquirements. The laborer is as useful in his own place as the philosopher in his. Nor is it necessary to have many talents. One talent, rightly used, is much better than 10 wrongly used. Often a man can do more with 1 than his contemporary can do with 10. Often a man can make $1 go farther than 20 in the hands of his neighbor. Often the poor man lives more comfortably than the millionaire. All depends on the individual himself. If he make right use of what the Creator has given him, and live according to the laws of God and nature, he is fulfilling his allotted place in the universal scheme of creation. In other words, when he does his best, he is living up to the standard of a useful manhood. Now, in order to do his best, a man of ordinary intelligence and education should be able to express himself correctly, both in speaking and in writing. That is, he should be able to convey his thoughts in an intelligent manner which the simplest can understand. The manner in which a speaker or writer conveys his thoughts is known as his style. In other words, style may be defined as the peculiar manner in which a man expresses his conceptions through the medium of language. It depends upon the choice of words and their arrangement to convey a meaning. Scarcely any two writers have exactly the same style, that is to say, express their ideas after the same peculiar form, just as no two mortals are fashioned by nature in the same mold, so that one is an exact counterpart of the other. Just as men differ in the accent and tones of their voices, so do they differ in the construction of their language. Two reporters sent out on the same mission, say to report a fire, will verbally differ in their accounts, though materially both descriptions will be the same as far as the leading facts are concerned. One will express himself in a style different from the other. If you are asked to describe the dancing of a red-haired lady at the last charity ball, you can either say, "The ruby Circe, with the Titan locks glowing like the oriflamme which surrounds the golden god of day as he sinks to rest amid the crimson glory of the burnished west, gave a divine exhibition of the terpsichorean art, which thrilled the souls of the multitude." Or you can simply say, "The red-haired lady danced very well and pleased the audience." The former is a specimen of the ultra-florid or bombastic style, which may be said to depend upon the pomposity of verbosity for its effect. The latter is a specimen of simple natural style. Needless to say, it is to be preferred. The other should be avoided. It stamps the writer as a person of shallowness, ignorance, and inexperience. It has been eliminated from the newspapers. Even the most flatulent of yellow sheets no longer tolerate it in their columns. Affectation and pedantry in style are now universally condemned. It is the duty of every speaker and writer to labor after a pleasing style. It gains him an entrance where he would otherwise be debarred. Often the interest of a subject depends as much on the way it is presented as on the subject itself. One writer will make it attractive, another repulsive. For instance, take a passage in history. Treated by one historian, it is like a desiccated mummy, dry, dull, disgusting, while under the spell of another it is, as it were, galvanized into a virile living thing, which not only pleases but captivates the reader. Diction. The first requisite of style is choice of words, and this comes under the head of diction, the property of style which has reference to the words and phrases used in speaking and writing. The secret of literary skill from any standpoint consists in putting the right word in the right place. In order to do this, it is imperative to know the meaning of the words we use, their exact literal meaning. Many synonymous words are seemingly interchangeable and appear as if the same meaning were applicable to 3 or 4 of them at the same time. But when all such words are reduced to a final analysis, it is clearly seen that there is a marked difference in their meaning. For instance, grief and sorrow seem to be identical, but they are not. Grief is active, sorrow is more or less passive. Grief is caused by troubles and misfortunes which come to us from the outside, while sorrow is often the consequence of our own acts. Grief is frequently loud and violent. Sorrow is always quiet and retiring. Grief shouts, sorrow remains calm. If you are not sure of the exact meaning of a word, look it up immediately in the dictionary. Sometimes some of our great scholars are puzzled over simple words in regard to meaning, spelling, or pronunciation. Whenever you meet a strange word, Note it down until you discover its meaning and use. Read the best books you can get, books written by men and women who are acknowledged masters of language, and study how they use their words, where they place them in sentences, and the meanings they convey to the readers. Mix in good society. Listen attentively to good talkers, and try to imitate their manner of expression. If a word is used you do not understand, don't be ashamed to ask its meaning. True, a small vocabulary will carry you through, but it is an advantage to have a large one. When you live alone, a little pot serves just as well as a large one to cook your victuals, and it is handy and convenient. But when your friends or neighbors come to dine with you, you will need a much larger pot, and it is better to have it in store, so that you will not be put to shame for your scantiness of furnishings. Get as many words as you possibly can. If you don't need them now, pack them away in the garrets of your brain so that you can call upon them if you require them. Keep a notebook. Jot down the words you don't understand, or clearly understand, and consult the dictionary when you get time. Purity. Purity of style consists in using words which are reputable, national, and present, which means that the words are in current use by the best authorities, that they are used throughout the nation and not confined to one particular part, and that they are words in constant use at the present time. There are two guiding principles in the choice of words: good use and good taste. Good use tells us whether a word is right or wrong. Good taste, whether it is adapted to our purpose or not. A word that is obsolete, or too new to have gained a place in the language, or that is a provincialism, should not be used. Here are the 10 Commandments of English style. 1. Do not use foreign words. 2. Do not use a long word when a short one will serve your purpose. Fire is much better than conflagration. 3. Do not use technical words, or those understood only by specialists in their respective lines, except when you are writing especially for such people. 4. Do not use slang. 5. Do not use provincialisms, as I guess for I think, I reckon for I know, etc. 6. Do not, in writing prose, use poetical or antiquated words, as lore, ere, morn, yea, nay, verily, peradventure. 7. Do not use trite and hackneyed words and expressions, as on the job, up and in, down and out. 8. Do not use newspaper words which have not established a place in the language, as to bugle, to suicide, etc. 9. Do not use ungrammatical words and forms, as I ain't, he don't. 10. Do not use ambiguous words or phrases, as he showed me all about the house. Trite words, similes, and metaphors which have become hackneyed and worn out should be allowed to rest in the oblivion of past usage. Such expressions and phrases as Sweet 16, the almighty dollar, Uncle Sam, on the fence, the glorious Fourth, young America, the lords of creation, the rising generation, the weaker sex, the weaker vessel, sweetness long drawn out, and chief cook and bottle washer, should be put on the shelf, as they are utterly worn out from too much usage. Some of the old similes which have outlived their usefulness and should be pensioned off are sweet as sugar, bold as a lion, strong as an ox, quick as a flash, cold as ice, stiff as a poker, white as snow, busy as a bee, pale as a ghost, rich as Croesus, cross as a bear, and a great many more, far too numerous to mention. Be as original as possible in the use of expression. Don't follow in the old rut, but try and strike out for yourself. This does not mean that you should try to set the style, or do anything outlandish or out of the way, or be an innovator on the prevailing custom. In order to be original, there is no necessity for you to introduce something novel or establish precedent. The probability is you are not fit to do either, by education or talent. While following the style of those who are acknowledged leaders, you can be original in your language. Try and clothe an idea different from what it has been clothed, and better. If you are speaking or writing of dancing, don't talk or write about tripping the light fantastic toe. It is over 200 years since Milton expressed it that way in L'Allegro. You're not a Milton, and besides, over 1 million have stolen it from Milton until it is now no longer worth stealing. Don't resurrect obsolete words, such as whilom, yclept, whiz, etc., and be careful in regard to obsolescent words, that is, words that are at the present time gradually passing from use, such as quoth, trow, betwixt, amongst, froward, etc. And beware of new words. Be original in the construction and arrangement of your language, but don't try to originate words. Leave that to the masters of language. And don't be the first to try such words. Wait until the chemists of speech have tested them and passed upon their merits. Quintilian said, "Prefer the oldest of the new, and the newest of the old." Pope put this in rhyme, and it still holds good. In words as fashions the same rule will hold, alike fantastic if too new or old. Be not the first by whom the new are tried, nor yet the last to lay the old aside. Propriety. Propriety of style consists in using words in their proper sense, and, as in the case of purity, good usage is the principal test. Many words have acquired in actual use a meaning very different from what they once possessed. Prevent formerly meant to go before, and that meaning is implied in its Latin derivation. Now it means to put a stop to hinder. To attain propriety of style, it is necessary to avoid confounding words derived from the same root, as respectfully and respectively. It is necessary to use words in their accepted sense, or the sense which everyday use sanctions. Simplicity. Simplicity of style has reference to the choice of simple words and their unaffected presentation. Simple words should always be used in preference to compound and complicated ones when they express the same or almost the same meaning. The Anglo-Saxon element in our language comprises the simple words which express the relations of everyday life: strong, terse, vigorous, the language of the fireside, street, market, and farm. It is this style which characterizes the Bible and many of the great English classics, such as the Pilgrim's Progress, Robinson Crusoe, and Gulliver's Travels. Clearness. Clearness of style should be one of the leading considerations with the beginner in composition. He must avoid all obscurity and ambiguous phrases. If he write a sentence or phrase, and see that a meaning might be inferred from it otherwise than intended, he should rewrite it in such a way that there can be no possible doubt. Words, phrases, or clauses that are closely related should be placed as near to each other as possible, that their mutual relation may clearly appear, and no word should be omitted that is necessary to the complete expression of thought. Unity. Unity is that property of style which keeps all parts of a sentence in connection with the principal thought, and logically subordinate to it. A sentence may be constructed as to suggest the idea of oneness to the mind, or it may be so loosely put together as to produce a confused and indefinite impression. Ideas that have but little connection should be expressed in separate sentences, and not crowded into one. Keep long parentheses out of the middle of your sentences, and when you have apparently brought your sentences to a close, don't try to continue the thought or idea by adding supplementary clauses. Strength. Strength is that property of style which gives animation, energy, and vivacity to language, and sustains the interest of the reader. It is as necessary to language as good food is to the body. Without it, the words are weak and feeble, and create little or no impression on the mind. In order to have strength, the language must be concise, that is, much expressed in little compass. You must hit the nail fairly on the head, and drive it in straight. Go critically over what you write, and strike out every word, phrase, and clause, the omission of which impairs neither the clearness nor force of the sentence, and so avoid redundancy, tautology, and circumlocution. Give the most important words the most prominent places, which, as has been pointed out elsewhere, are the beginning and end of the sentence. Harmony. Harmony is that property of style which gives a smoothness to the sentence, so that when the words are sounded, their connection becomes pleasing to the ear. It adapts sound to sense. Most people construct their sentences without giving thought to the way they will sound, and as a consequence, we have many jarring and discordant combinations, such as, "Thou strengthenedst thy position, and actedst arbitrarily and derogatorily to my interests." Harsh, disagreeable verbs are liable to occur with the Quaker form thou of the personal pronoun. This form is now nearly obsolete, the plural you being almost universally used. To obtain harmony in the sentence, long words that are hard to pronounce and combinations of letters of one kind should be avoided. Expressive of writer. Style is expressive of the writer as to who he is and what he is. As a matter of structure in composition, it is the indication of what a man can do. As a matter of quality, It is an indication of what he is. Kinds of style. Style has been classified in different ways, but it admits of so many designations that it is very hard to enumerate a table. In fact, there are as many styles as there are writers, for no two authors write exactly after the same form. However, we may classify the styles of the various authors in broad divisions as 1. Dry, 2. Plain, 3. Neat, 4. Elegant, 5. Florid, 6. Bombastic. The dry style excludes all ornament and makes no effort to appeal to any sense of beauty. Its object is simply to express the thoughts in a correct manner. This style is exemplified by Berkeley. The plain style does not seek ornamentation either, but aims to make clear and concise statements without any elaboration or embellishment. Locke and Whately illustrate the plain style. The neat style only aspires after ornament sparingly. Its object is to have correct figures, pure diction, and clear and harmonious sentences. Goldsmith and Gray are the acknowledged leaders in this kind of style. The elegant style uses every ornament that can beautify, and avoids every excess which would degrade. Macaulay and Addison have been enthroned as the kings of this style. To them all writers bend the knee in homage. The florid style goes to excess in superfluous and superficial ornamentation, and strains after a highly colored imagery. The poems of Ossian typify this style. The bombastic is characterized by such an excess of words, figures, and ornaments as to be ridiculous and disgusting. It is like a circus clown dressed up in gold tinsel. Dickens gives a fine example of it in Sergeant Buzfuz's speech in The Pickwick Papers. Among other varieties of style may be mentioned the colloquial, the laconic, the concise, the diffuse, the abrupt, the flowing, the quaint, the epigrammatic, the flowery, the feeble, the nervous, the vehement, and the affected. The manner of these is sufficiently indicated by the adjective used to describe them. In fact, style is as various as character, and expresses the individuality of the writer, or in other words, as the French writer Buffon very aptly remarks, the style is the man himself. End of chapter 9.
Is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. How to Speak and Write Correctly by Joseph Devlin. Chapter 10. Suggestions. How to write, what to write, correct speaking and speakers. Rules of grammar and rhetoric are good in their own place. Their laws must be observed in order to express thoughts and ideas in the right way, so that they shall convey a determinate sense and meaning in a pleasing and acceptable manner. Hard and fast rules, however, can never make a writer or author. That is the business of Old Mother Nature, and nothing can take her place. If Nature has not endowed a man with faculties to put his ideas into proper composition, he cannot do so. He may have no ideas worthy of the recording. If a person has not a thought to express, it cannot be expressed. Something cannot be manufactured out of nothing. The author must have thoughts and ideas before he can express them on paper. These come to him by nature and environment and are developed and strengthened by study. There is an old Latin quotation in regard to the poet which says, "Poeta nascitur non fit," the translation of which, "The poet is born, not made." To a degree the same applies to the author. Some men are great scholars as far as book learning is concerned, yet they cannot express themselves in passable composition. Their knowledge is like gold locked up in a chest where it is of no value to themselves or the rest of the world. The best way to learn to write is to sit down and write, just as the best way to learn to ride a bicycle is to mount the wheel and pedal away. Write first about common things, subjects that are familiar to you. Try, for instance, an essay on a cat. Say something original about her. Don't say, "She is very playful when young, but becomes grave as she grows old." That has been said more than 50,000 times before. Tell what you have seen the family cat doing, how she caught a mouse in the garret, and what she did after catching it. Familiar themes are always the best for the beginner. Don't attempt to describe a scene in Australia if you have never been there and know nothing of the country. Never hunt for subjects, there are thousands around you. Describe what you saw yesterday, a fire, a runaway horse, a dog fight on the street, and be original in your description. Imitate the best writers in their style, but not in their exact words. Get out of the beaten path. Make a pathway of your own. Know what you write about. Write what you know. This is a golden rule to which you must adhere. To know, you must study. The world is an open book in which all who run may read. Nature is one great volume, the pages of which are open to the peasant as well as to the peer. Study nature's moods and tenses, for they are vastly more important than those of the grammar. Book learning is most desirable, but, after all, it is only theory and not practice. The grandest allegory in the English, in fact, in any language, was written by an ignorant, so-called ignorant, tinker named John Bunyan. Shakespeare was not a scholar in the sense we regard the term today, yet no man ever lived or probably ever will live that equalled or will equal him in the expression of thought. He simply read the book of nature and interpreted it from the standpoint of his own magnificent genius. Don't imagine that a college education is necessary to success as a writer. Far from it. Some of our college men are deadheads, drones, parasites on the body social, not alone useless to the world, but to themselves. A person may be so ornamental that he is valueless from any other standpoint. As a general rule, ornamental things serve but little purpose. A man may know so much of everything that he knows little of anything. This may sound paradoxical, but, nevertheless, experience proves its truth. If you are poor, that is not a detriment, but an advantage. Poverty is an incentive to endeavor, not a drawback. Better to be born with a good working brain in your head than with a gold spoon in your mouth. If the world had been depending on the so-called pets of fortune, it would have deteriorated long ago. From the pits of poverty, from the arenas of suffering, from the hovels of neglect, from the backwood cabins of obscurity, from the lanes and byways of oppression, from the dingy garrets and basements of unending toil and drudgery have come men and women who have made history, made the world brighter, better, higher, holier for their existence in it, made of it a place good to live in and worthy to die in, men and women who have hallowed it by their footsteps and sanctified it with their presence, and in many cases consecrated it with their blood. Poverty is a blessing, not an evil, a benison from the Father's hand, if accepted in the right spirit. Instead of retarding, it has elevated literature in all ages. Homer was a blind beggarman singing his snatches of song for the dole of charity. Grand old Socrates, oracle of wisdom, many a day went without his dinner because he had not the wherewithal to get it, while teaching the youth of Athens. The divine Dante was nothing better than a beggar, houseless, homeless, friendless, wandering through Italy while he composed his immortal cantos. Milton, who in his blindness looked where angels fear to tread, was steeped in poverty while writing his sublime conception, Paradise Lost. Shakespeare was glad to hold and water the horses of patrons outside the White Horse Theatre for a few pennies in order to buy bread. Burns burst forth in never dying song while guiding the ploughshare. Poor Heinrich Heine, neglected and in poverty, from his mattress grave of suffering in Paris added literary laurels to the wealth of his German fatherland. In America, Elihu Burritt, while attending the Anvil, made himself a master of a score of languages and became the literary lion of his age and country. In other fields of endeavour, poverty has been the spur to action. Napoleon was born in obscurity, the son of a hand-to-mouth scrivener in the backward island of Corsica. Abraham Lincoln, the boast and pride of America, the man who made this land too hot for the feet of slaves, came from a log cabin in the Ohio backwoods. So did James A. Garfield. Ulysses Grant came from a tan yard to become the world's greatest general. Thomas A. Edison commenced as a newsboy on a railway train. The examples of these men are incentives to action. Poverty thrusts them forward instead of keeping them back. Therefore, if you are poor, make your circumstances a means to an end. Have ambition, keep a goal in sight, and bend every energy to reach that goal. A story is told of Thomas Carlyle the day he attained the highest honour the literary world could confer upon him, when he was elected Lord Rector of Edinburgh University. After his installation speech, in going through the halls he met a student seemingly deep in study. In his own peculiar, abrupt, crusty way, the sage of Chelsea interrogated the young man. "For what profession are you studying?" "I don't know," returned the youth. "You don't know!" thundered Carlyle. "Young man, you are a fool." Then he went on to qualify his vehement remark. "My boy, when I was your age, I was stooped in the grinding, gripping poverty in a little village of Ecclefechan, in the wilds of Blankfrieshire, where in all the place only the minister and myself could read the Bible. Yet poor and obscure as I was, in my mind's eye I saw a chair awaiting for me in the Temple of Fame, and day and night and day I studied until I sat in that chair today as Lord Rector of Edinburgh University." Another Scotchman, Robert Buchanan, the famous novelist, set out for London from Glasgow with but a half-crown in his pocket. "Here goes," said he, "for a grave in Westminster Abbey." He was not much of a scholar, but his ambition carried him on and he became one of the great literary lions of the world's metropolis. Henry M. Stanley was a poorhouse waif whose real name was John Rowlands. He was brought up in a Welsh workhouse, but he had ambition, so he rose to be a great explorer, a great writer, became a member of Parliament, and was knighted by the British sovereign. Have ambition to succeed and you will succeed. Cut the word failure out of your lexicon. Don't acknowledge it. Remember, "In life's earnest battle they only prevail who daily march onward and never say fail." Let every obstacle you encounter be but a stepping stone in the path of onward progress to the goal of success. If untoward circumstances surround you, resolve to overcome them. Bunyan wrote The Pilgrim's Progress in Bedford jail on scraps of wrapping paper while he was half starved on a diet of bread and water. That unfortunate American genius, Edgar Allan Poe, wrote The Raven, the most wonderful conception as well as the most highly artistic poem in all English literature, in a little cottage in the Fordham section of New York, while he was in the direst straits of want. Throughout all his short and wonderfully brilliant career, poor Poe never had a dollar he could call his own. Such, however, was both his fault and his misfortune, and he is a bad exemplar. Don't think that the knowledge of a library of books is essential to success as a writer. Often a multiplicity of books is confusing. Master a few good books, and master them well, and you will have all that is necessary. A great authority has said, "Beware of the man of one book," which means that a man of one book is a master of the craft. It is claimed that a thorough knowledge of the Bible alone will make any person a master of literature. Certain it is that the Bible and Shakespeare constitute an epitome of the essentials of knowledge. Shakespeare gathered the fruitage of all who went before him. He has sown the seeds for all who shall ever come after him. He was the great intellectual ocean whose waves touch the continents of all thought. Books are cheap nowadays. The greatest works, thanks to the printing press, are within the reach of all, and the more you read the better, providing they are worth reading. Sometimes a man takes poison into his system, unconscious of the fact that it is poison, as in the case of certain foods, and it is very hard to throw off its effects. Therefore, be careful in your choice of reading matter. If you cannot afford a full library, and as has been said, such is not necessary, select a few of the great works of the master minds, assimilate and digest them, so that they will be of advantage to your literary system. Elsewhere in this volume is given a list of some of the world's masterpieces from which you can make a selection. Your brain is a storehouse. Don't put useless furniture into it to crowd it to the exclusion of what is useful. Lay up only the valuable and serviceable kind which you can call into requisition at any moment. As it is necessary to study the best authors in order to be a writer, so it is necessary to study the best speakers in order to talk with correctness and in good style. To talk rightly you must imitate the masters of oral speech. Listen to the best conversationalists and how they express themselves. Go to hear the leading lectures, speeches, and sermons. No need to imitate the gestures of elocution. It is nature, not art, that makes the elocutionist and the orator. It is not how a speaker expresses himself, but the language which he uses and the manner of its use which should interest you. Have you heard the present-day masters of speech? There have been past-time masters, but their tongues are stilled in the dust of the grave, and you can only read their eloquence now. You can, however, listen to the charm of the living. To many of us voices still speak from the grave, voices to which we have listened when fired with the divine essence of speech. Perhaps you have hung with rapture on the words of Beecher and Talmage. Both thrilled the souls of men and won countless thousands over to a living gospel. Both were masters of the word. They scattered the flowers of rhetoric on the shrine of elegance and hurled veritable bouquets at their audiences which were eagerly seized by the latter and treasured in the storehouse of memory. Both were scholars and philosophers, yet they were far surpassed by Spurgeon, a plain man of the people, with little or no claim to education in the modern sense of the word. Spurgeon by his speech attracted thousands to his tabernacle. The Protestant and Catholic, Turk, Jew, and Mohammedan rushed to hear him, and listened entranced to his language. Such another was Dwight L. Moody, the greatest evangelist the world has ever known. Moody was not a man of learning. He commenced life as a shoe salesman in Chicago. Yet no man ever lived who drew such audiences and so fascinated them with the spell of his speech. Oh, that was personal magnetism, you will say, but it was nothing of the kind. It was the burning words that fell from the lips of these men, and the way, the manner, the force with which they used those words that counted and attracted the crowds to listen unto them. Personal magnetism or personal appearance entered not as factors into their success. Indeed, as far as physique were concerned, some of them were handicapped. Spurgeon was a short, podgy, fat little man. Moody was like a country farmer. Talmage, in his big cloak, was one of the most slovenly of men, and only Beecher was passable in the way of refinement and gentlemanly bearing. Physical appearance, as so many think, is not the sesame to the interest of an audience. Daniel O'Connell, the Irish Tribune, was a homely, ugly, awkward, ungainly man, yet his words attracted millions to his side and gained for him the hostile ear of the British Parliament. He was a master of verbiage and knew just what to say to captivate his audiences. It is words and their placing that count on almost all occasions. No matter how refined in our respects the person may be, if he use words wrongly and express himself in language not in accordance with proper construction, he will repel you, whereas the man who places his words correctly and employs language in harmony with the laws of good speech, let him be ever so humble, will attract and have an influence over you. The good speaker, the correct speaker, is always able to command attention, and doors are thrown open to him which remain closed to others not equipped with a like facility of expression. The man who can talk well and to the point need never fear to go idle. He is required in nearly every walk of life and field of human endeavor. The world wants him at every turn. Employers are constantly on the lookout for good talkers, those who are able to attract the public and convince others by the force of their language. A man may be able, educated, refined, of unblemished character; nevertheless, if he lack the power to express himself, put forth his views in good and appropriate speech, he has yet to take a back seat, while some one with much less ability gets the opportunity to come to the front because he can clothe his ideas in ready words and talk effectively. You may again say that nature, not art, makes a man a fluent speaker. To a degree this is true, but it is art that makes him a correct speaker, and correctness leads to fluency. It is possible for everyone to become a correct speaker, if he will but persevere and take a little pains and care. At the risk of repetition, good advice may be here emphasized. Listen to the best speakers and note carefully the words which impress you most. Keep a notebook and jot down words, phrases, sentences that are in any way striking or out of the ordinary run. If you do not understand the exact meaning of a word you have heard, look it up in the dictionary. There are many words called synonyms which have almost a like signification. Nevertheless, when examined, they express different shades of meaning, and in some cases, instead of being close related, are widely divergent. Beware of such words. Find their exact meaning and learn to use them in their right places. Be open to criticism. Don't resent it, but rather invite it, and look upon those as friends who point out your defects in order that you may remedy them. End of chapter 10.